Hi, everybody. This is Catnip on June 3rd, 2020, with our podcast for Press Reset World. Started with the idea that COVID-19 can be a great time to reimagine our world and what we need to do. Today, I am virtually joined by Kayla Siefried to educate us on permaculture. She is the site manager and community education coordinator of a unique and wonderful place that I enjoy visiting, the Compost Education Center in Victoria, BC. Welcome, Kayla.
Thank you.
So my first question for those who are not sure about this word, permaculture, what is it and why is it important?
Yeah, there's lots of different definitions for permaculture that are out there. And for me, I find that permaculture is a way of cleverly designing systems, and it can be systems in your yard, but it can also be systems in your life to mimic and respond to how nature organizes itself. So it's really a way of respecting the natural systems of life and trying to recreate those in your own life and in your own yard and in your own neighborhoods.
We did put a blog post out that referenced the movie The Biggest Little Farm, which I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I have seen it, yeah.
And a lot of people are very inspired by it. It's a beautiful film, and it's probably some people's first introduction to this idea of biodiversity, working with nature and farming. But you're doing this. The Compost Center is in the more of an urban center, and doing things on an urban scale. So tell me a bit about that and just sort of this growing movement. What do you see happening?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, here at the Compost Education Center, we're in an urban space, and our goal really is to support the education of people who live relatively urbanly, and encourage them to pay attention to how they're composting, how they're taking care of their soil, how they're growing food, and what they're doing around conservation practices. And really all of those things fit under the umbrella of permaculture. And so, yeah, permaculture can be done on a very small scale. It can be done on a very grand scale as well. And here at the CBC, we're on that more small scale end of things. And I'm kind of forgetting the latter part of your question there.
Just sort of what do you see about in this movement growing? But can I actually insert a question here? Is like when you say urban setting, to me, I immediately think apartments, condos. Are there things that you're suggesting for that? Are people doing things on their balconies, or is it just people who have lawns? Can you sort of?
All of the above. All of the above. So there's ways that one can compost on their balcony in their apartment, even if they don't have a balcony, doing things like bokashi or vermicomposting, which is composting with worms. And there's ways that we can grow plants indoors, outdoors. There's all sorts of creative solutions for urban situations to basically close loops. And that's a big piece of permaculture, is how can we close loops so that there's not this sort of linear, I buy something from the store, I have plastic packaging, I throw it out, it goes to the landfill, but instead we're creating these systems where there is no waste, there's no particular ins, there's no particular outs that you need to do away with. Instead, it's this whole closed loop. So I have a carrot that I've grown, the carrot top I don't choose to eat, I put it in the compost bin, that compost re-nourishes my soil that I then grow in next year. So there are ways, even in apartment buildings, to do that kind of closed loop cycling of nutrients. And in some ways it takes like a whole community to support that when lots of people are living in quite urban settings. And just to comment on the piece about what we're recognizing here at the Compost Education Center, certainly since the pandemic has begun here, there has been an immense increase in people's interest around composting, building their soil health, and gardening. And I think that that's really because people are sort of seeking out healthful hobbies in their extra time. So perhaps they have spare time, and so they're choosing to grow food and explore what it is to grow food and learn those skills. But also I think there's a recognition that some of our food systems are a bit precarious. And so if we can even grow our own salads in our backyard or on our balcony, then that really increases our resiliency, even just a little bit. And growing food and nourishing soil and some of the other permaculture practices that are around, they really are skills for resiliency, and they really help a community to become more resilient in times of pandemic, but also in times of climate change. So these skills are just so important. And I think a lot of people, as we've become more urbanized and modernized and, you know, focused on tasks and jobs that are more online focused, we've sort of lost those skills, or we've unlearned them or forgotten them, or we haven't been taught them by our parents and our grandparents. So there's this real upswelling of people who are really interested in reskilling in how to grow food, so that we can really become more resilient in these times of pandemic or in these times of climate change.
Yeah, everybody's gone back to baking, baking and gardening, and the urban garden, the community gardens are getting a lot of interest. So, but would you say the Compost Education Center is fairly unique? Are there lots of them in all kinds of cities now? Are you helping other cities? What's sort of the history and how you see it going outward?
Sure, yeah, the Compost Education Center has been around for 28 and a bit years now, so it's had a really long journey. And on Vancouver Island, for sure, it's the only one like it. There's lots of other really amazing food security organizations that are out there, but the particular focus on soil health that we have here at the Compost Education Center is pretty unique. And really, from my learning, both out in the world, working on farms, working in gardens, and then also here at the Compost Education Center, I really just, and even just, you know, gardening in my own backyard here in Fernwood and having to move locations and recognizing that soil health is really where things begin. If you take care of your soil, if you grow your soil, if you nourish your soil, then in turn the plants kind of take care of themselves, because they're sitting in this well of nutrients, but also they're sitting in this well of life, and there's this whole, you know, soil food web that is working to support the health of those plants. So yeah, that was my little tangent about sort of laying down that I think soil health is super important to start with, because that just makes the growing of your food far easier. But there's lots of other organizations here in town, in the city of Victoria and Lekwungen territory, that are doing really incredible work, and that work has kind of like brought us together in this time of pandemic even more so. And there's lots of other organizations in different parts of the country and the world that are advocating and educating around permaculture and growing your own food and these resilient skills that are really important in times of chaos or change. And really, composting is like one important element in permaculture, right? Composting is a closed loop cycle. So if we are able to take anything that is, quote, waste and turn it into something that is completely a gift and something that can be used in your yard, then you're really practicing that sort of closed loop permaculture practice. And even revisioning the idea of waste in itself, you know, I think that we've gotten really into this linear sort of chronological time scale in our North American Western world, at least, where we kind of think in stages along this line. And so we think about things as waste rather than seeing what kind of potential they have. So something like a banana peel is actually like incredible organic matter that can be transformed into something that's going to increase the nutrient density of future food that you're going to grow in that spot. So yeah, there's a cool reframe that can happen with permaculture, where we stop thinking about things as waste or garbage, and instead we think about them as a gift or something that can be used to enhance our life in other ways.
Right. And so other things like, for example, rain harvesting, you also educate about that. Am I correct?
Yeah, we have all sorts of conservation practices that are going on here at the Compost Education Center. So not just about soil health, not just about composting, not just about growing one's own food, but extending the sort of closed loop cycles, again, outward even more into the more fulsome, you know, aspects of your lifestyle. So we do have a significant amount of rain catchment here at the Compost Ed Center. We've got a big cistern where we store big amounts of water. We have smaller rain barrels, which are more practical for, say, a renter in town to set something up like that. We also have a rain garden where part of the roof of our office building, the rain filters down this really gorgeous fork and spoon created rain chain, and it slows down the water so that the soil has a chance to absorb that water and spread it out to this native plant rain garden that we have here. And then we also have other things like we've got a little closed loop aquaponics system, and we used to pull power from the grid in order to power the little pump that runs our aquaponics system, but now we have solar panels, which is really cool because we can further demonstrate the capacity of nature to sort of like take care of itself. You know, the sun fuels the pump, which keeps the water oxygenated for the fish, and the fish are pooping in the water, and then the poopy water is feeding the plants that are above the aquaponics system that are growing there, feeding us, and then that clean water, the plants clean the water to go back to the fish in that aquaponic system. So yeah, that's like a good little closed loop example as well. So there's lots of other conservation practices that we have going on here at the Compost Ed Center. Certainly tons of composting. Even in our office, we've got things like light tubes, which basically are little tunnels through to the ceiling. They're like little skylights that amplify the natural light, so we have to use less electricity. Yeah, it's really, the Compost Education Center is here to be a demonstration site of what can be. And actually I'm sitting right now in our straw bale learning classroom. So this is the space where all of our adult education programs happen, and then also where a lot of our school programs, so kids come through for a site tour and they'll stop here in the straw bale. And it's a great example of a very small scale micro natural building technique. More common on the coast is something called cob, but straw bale was completed here in 2006, and it really feels different even when you walk in here, partially because of the temperature and the nature of natural buildings, but also just having these more curvaceous walls just feels more like you're living with earth than not. So lots of different things on our site. We share space with an allotment garden, which is also super great because we have that community interaction piece, and yeah, lots of neat things going on here.
Can I ask you, let's get this a little bit more personal. When did you get involved, and sort of what's your story? Were you kind of raised with this all the time, or did you come to it, and how did you come to it?
Yeah, sure. So I was actually born and raised in Southern Ontario, on Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe territory, and I grew up around my granny, who both sides of my family were farming families, very subsistence sort of farmers, but also who sold big cash crops. So my dad's family had the cider mill in the same town as my mom's family had the rutabaga farm. But they beyond those crops and practices, they had a complete like subsistence garden. My mom tells stories about how, of course, when she grew up, the only thing they would buy from the store was sugar and tea, because they got their flour from the mill in town. People were growing wheat, and they grew all of their fruits and veggies that they needed. They preserved things, and they also had all sorts of animals going on. So I feel like that is where my inspiration is rooted. I grew up around my granny doing a very hobby-based farm. She had moved off the farm by then, so there wasn't any active farming in my family growing up as a career. But my granny did a lot of gardening. So, and she did it in a very non-permaculture way, to tell you the truth. It was very much road, and I remember that she used some different insecticides. I can recall that as a kid, but there was just something so joyous of like helping her harvest all of the peas and coming and sitting on the porch and just shucking the peas, and she would let me eat as many peas as I wanted, and then we would go and make pea soup. So lots of sweet memories of being in her garden growing up. But I suppose it took me until university to really light up around food systems. And I studied environment and resource studies in university, and I for the first time had my own backyard garden at a place that I was renting in the university town that I was living in. And that was cool because I had never done gardening without the support of granny or mom. And so that was super inspiring. And then I also just kind of started to open my eyes a little bit more to the effects and impacts of industrial agriculture. And I've always felt a super strong connection to earth, and and like a super strong reverence and call to respect the earth. And I feel like that kind of, you know, came even more to light in university when I learned sort of some of the ways in which we were doing things like growing food, which is meant to nourish us from the inside out. You know, it's really supposed to support our growth, yet we're growing stuff that's fairly nutritionally devoid and harming the planet in the process. So I think that I had some aha moments in university, and then after university, spent some time on a bicycle tour with an organization called the Otesha Project, where I was cycling from Calgary to Vancouver, and we stayed at a lot of farms along the way. We were doing youth education using physical theater, and we stayed at a lot of small scale organic farms that were employing permaculture practices, and that really lit me up. And so that really began my journey of visiting different farms and working on different farms to experience the different ways in which people were really closing loops, respecting the earth, you know, being grateful for it, like the whole gamut. And then I studied permaculture down in Ecuador for a little bit with some folks who had relocated there from Canada. And so I did a really great permaculture design certificate there. And then I also did a permaculture design certificate here on Vancouver Island with Starhawk, doing her Earth Activist training up at the Eco Village in Shawnigan Lake. And so I've done the studies, but really the experiments of working on farms, volunteering on farms, and then employing the practices in my own life, in my own backyard, is where the true learning happens, honestly. So yeah, and I've been a renter all of this time, and so have really had to sort of reframe also the way in which I steward land and care for spaces as like a true gift to the earth, because it's you know, living in many places as a renter and having to move around, often not by choice, you really have to sort of retrain your mind to see that, you know, all of the ways in which you've stewarded that soil and all of the perennials that you've planted there and the, you know, all of the plants that you've watched grow over the course of time. It's really a gift for the earth, a gift for perhaps the next people who will live there. It's really a sort of an act of service for the health of the environment.
So in your new role at the Compost Center, is there somebody, what do you see when you bring people in? Is there a story of one person you can give as example who was inspired and encouraged, or could be one of your volunteers or your employees?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, no one person is specifically coming up for me right now, but one thing that I experience quite often is that we'll have people who are new to town come and visit. Usually people who you know, have just arrived on the coast from farther afield or even just from the mainland, and they'll be curious about things, particularly in this region, how to grow food, particularly on southern Vancouver Island. But then it's pretty inspiring when you see people wander through the site and just feel, you know, in awe of what we've got going on in such a small space. And then the questions start flowing, you know, people's curiosities lead to lots of questions. And it really is, yeah, I feel super grateful, and it feels very joyous for me to be able to share what knowledge that I have with people, knowing that I'm also very much on an educational journey myself. I'm very much still learning all of this. And that's part of what permaculture is about, is like experimenting and learning as you go. So yeah, I think like for me, it feels quite fantastic to see people who are new to the area come and get inspired, get the knowledge that they need, get sort of, you know, full of the resources that they might need to transform wherever they are staying or however they are living their life into a more sustainable one. And we have had people, there's one person actually now, a specific person that's coming to my mind, who volunteered with us for a long time after first coming to a bunch of workshops, and then ended up on our board for a long time, and then still continued to volunteer with us beyond that as well. And she has said to me a number of times, like, the Compost Education Center is like where I came when I first moved to this region, and it just linked me up with so many incredible things and really, you know, changed the way in which I view my space and view my life, and the way that I connect to the community as well. The organization has
Yeah.
been here for a long time, so we're well connected with lots of other things. So
It's very much a community thing. And so when people go in there, because you have open houses one day a week, right? I think. Or
well, normally our site is open to the public Wednesdays to
now.
Saturdays.
Yeah.
So normally we're open Wednesdays to Saturdays for people to come and wander through and enjoy the space. We have an office space where we sell compost bins and garden seeds and other composting accessories. On Saturdays is when we have our adult workshops, and so those usually happen in this space here in the Strawbell Learning Classroom. Because of the pandemic, unfortunately, we have our gate closed at the moment. We are hoping that in the summer that will change. We're not exactly clear which phase we are involved in, so we're working on putting the proper things into place for staff and the public so that people can come and enjoy the garden and be really healthy and well. So hopefully July will be having our gates wide open again for folks to just come in and experience at leisure, because really that's why we have the demonstration site, is for people to come and experience it. So that's been a bit of a harder thing about COVID, is that we've had to have the gate closed for a bit, but I'm very hopeful that it will be open again soon. And we are still doing sales and answering email and phone call queries.
And you're doing some online courses, are you not?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been really neat to experiment with, because we've noticed that people have showed up to those online courses from farther afield, which has been really neat, because normally our adult workshops are really just for folks who live in this region, because they have to physically come here, of course. But we've had people from Montana and Ontario and the mainland of BC that have joined our workshops that are happening online at the moment. So that's kind of been very cool to see. And for your listeners, all of our workshops are listed at compost.bc.ca on our website, and we're often adding more as well. Especially right now, we've just added a slew of new workshops that that folks can sign up for online and then participate in. So yeah.
Since you mentioned COVID-19, maybe you can talk a little bit, because I know you're connected to this Growing Together. I think they've got more than one name, but can you talk a little bit about that and what that, because really it's been there for a while, but it's really taken off since COVID-19, I think.
Yeah, so it's been quite inspiring to see how different food security, food justice, growing food organizations have sort of bound together to put together some resources for folks in these times. So the City of Victoria has their Get Growing Victoria program, and that's, they've always sort of been advocates for supporting people to grow food on their own property, but the City of Victoria passed a motion to have city staff grow thousands of food-bearing plants in their greenhouse this spring, and so they've been distributing right now those seedlings for free to folks who have been negatively economically impacted by the coronavirus. And so along with that, a number of different organizations, many of whom sit on the Urban Food Table, which is sort of like a food policy council for the City of Victoria, we've started to come up with these educational resource offerings, so that when people are picking up their seedlings, or they're putting their first seeds in the ground, they have some supplementary information that's free and available to them, so that they know how to garden. The video series is the most exciting piece, I think, because they're little snapshots and tidbits done by different people and organizations that sit on the Urban Food Table around different topics. So for example, I've got one that's soon to be online, I hope, under the Growing Together sort of VISE, this collection of organizations that's on composting and mulching. And then I'll have another one in a couple of weeks about how to plan and site a garden. So yeah, the educational videos are really cool. And then there's also other neat, like FED, the Food Eco District, they're supplying 500 homes with startup gardening kits, and there's a garden mentor program, and there's just things popping up all over the place, and it's really super incredible to see all these people sort of binding together to support this like massive increase in interest around gardening. That's kind of what we've been what we've been advocating for a long time is for people to reskill, because we really see the importance of knowing how to grow one's own food and care for the soil. And now that it's here, we're like, okay, like let's harness this moment and really support these people to feel inspired year after year to grow their own food. And
Right.
my experience of working with people who are growing their own food for the first time is really that if in the first year they have even a little bit of success, it just feels so much more satisfying and inspiring for them to go back and do it the next year. So if we're able to provide them with the educational resources to have success in that first year, then perhaps it will be a skill that will be carried on.
Terrific. And so does your funding come from courses and selling things, or where does it come from? And you know, are you guys sustainable doing this, or how does it work?
Yeah, so we have a varied funding varied funding sources. We do have some core support from the Capital Regional District, which really keeps us going. So super grateful that the Capital Regional District sees us as such a valuable asset in the community. We write a lot of grants, which are always precarious and tricky, like so many nonprofits do, and so that's where the next sort of biggest chunk of our income comes from. And honestly, it's curious times because of the pandemic. We're not sure what 2021 and beyond will look like for those grants. So other ways that we are supported, which we're looking to a little bit more for future, is through our memberships and compost bin sales and workshop sales. So that's sort of more of like our social enterprise umbrella, where folks can buy compost bins and compost accessories from us here. And then workshops as well, though our workshops are very accessible, and if ever anybody, we really want our programming to be available to folks. So if ever somebody feels like it's not accessible to them, then they just need to reach out to us. But they do cost a little bit of money, and so that there's that. And then membership also supports our funding, so folks can support our work by becoming members, and it's just quite affordable to become a member. It's $25 for a year, and then you get one free workshop, which is $20 right there, including grounding.
Oh, what a deal!
Yeah, and then and you're in turn just really supporting our work. So I do really encourage folks to become a member if that's possible for them within their economic reality right now. And you can buy a membership either online or by calling into the Compost Education Center.
I will be doing that myself. I also noticed when I went onto the website, there's a whole section on healing city soils. Is that different, or what do you do there?
Yeah, so of course, we've got all sorts of neat little programs, like the Healing City Soils program, like our neighborhood composting pilot program. Yeah, lots of neat things that we get into. And so the Healing City Soils program is really amazing. It's a partnership with Royal Roads University and students and staff there. And so over the past, I think it's 4 years now, basically what we've been doing is offering free soil contaminants testing to residents of the Capital Regional District, to a certain number of residents. And once they get the results, if they have soil that is contaminated, hydrocarbons, heavy metals, we offer free workshops to them on how to begin healing that soil, how to begin remediating that soil, and these really low-tech suggestions on how to do that. Things like adding organic matter and composting and growing certain plants to accumulate those contaminants, and then safely disposing of them. So yeah, Healing City Soils, the idea is to build this online map which people can access right now and see where contamination hotspots are, but really just we want folks to have the information that they need to begin to take care of soils that have been, and steward and heal soils that have been negatively impacted by industrial activities and the like, in times past. With the guise also of decolonization, like it's really amazing to kind of think about how land must have been pre-contact and how it is now. And so if we can really empower individual renters or homeowners to start to really heal that soil, it's my belief that perhaps we're sort of rewriting stories of the past that are horrible in terms of how the land and the people who dwelled here were treated.
I think, again, I'm going to reference The Big Little Farm because it's a popular film and getting more popular out there ever since it moved to Netflix, that people were like, they never thought about soil, they never thought about biodiversity, they never thought about uh, uh, the soil disappearing with rain and flood, and retaining that, and it kind of addresses all those things, and
Mhm.
makes people aware that this is something we can do with nature. That's quite inspiring. I also got inspired from watching Kirsten Dirkson's videos, which are not the permaculture, but it's about housing. So I'd like to do something on that. But there is one guy who's, I think it's called Dryland in there, where he's done everything from the farm, and he's really got it out to the city, so that they started, because they were completely dried up, and all, even though they're by a river, and how much he's managed to uh, get the soil going again. That was the biggest thing, as it is on the biggest little farm. Start with the soil, get the soil going again. And to me, it was the biggest surprise in those, watching those films and those videos, was how quickly you can get the soil back.
Mhm. Yeah, it's true. It's very true. There's, some very low tech, easy techniques in which to do that, and it mostly involves using your waste and and adding it onto the soil. Organic matter in the form of our compost, our food scraps, the leaves we collect, cardboard. Like there's so much available organic matter, and it can start by simply just putting organic matter down.
Yeah, and it seems to be coming at a grassroots level. And it all ties into, of course, sustainability. But are you aware of, like, the province or Canada, or uh, do they have goals for sustainability that tie into your work?
Not that I know of. I've heard little rumblings here and there from colleagues, but none that I can speak of on the more provincial and national level. I know Food Secure Canada is doing incredible work around food security, but that not necessarily like the sustainability of how we're growing food and building back resiliency skills. So yeah, I'm sure there's some out there, but none that I can speak to directly.
Okay, so there's two things I ask people for, unless there's something more you want to talk about, or about the education center or permaculture in general. But there's two things I like to ask everybody who comes on the show. But first of all, is there more you want to say about
Maybe
permaculture?
I'll just really encourage folks to look into what it might be to start your own compost bin if you don't already have one going, and look into what it might look like to start to maybe grow your own salad or your own peas and beans this year, because I really do feel like that can be a really inspiring place to start, and it's just so healthy for us. Mentally, physically, our community, and healthy for the planet to do some of those simple practices. And if you're curious where to start, then definitely check out our website. We've got a ton of fact sheets under the Learn tab, and that's at compost.bc.ca. Lots of fact sheets and information there. And then we've got a whole slew of workshops. So maybe sign up for a workshop, and if you want to find some more concrete ways in which you can get going on a compost bin, or starting to grow a little bit of food.
And is there a big difference between the food waste compost that we're all now doing with our own little trays and stuff like that we take down to our green bins, than having your own compost bin? Does it go different places? And
It does. In the region, in the Capital Regional District, nearly every municipality ships the food scraps off the island, which is often surprising to folks. So I know the City of Victoria holds a contract off island with an industrial composting facility there. So we're trucking around really heavy food waste. It's mostly water, honestly. And so we're trucking that around. That takes a lot of energy. And unfortunately, that finished compost that's being made at an industrial composting facility isn't coming back to the island. So we're in nutrient deficit, and we're using a lot of energy to truck it around. So ideally, if we're able to do our own composting under our sink, on our balcony, in our backyard, far more sustainable. And you know, that closed loop piece again, right? Closing the loop, we're able to use the finished compost. So yeah, I would say there is a big difference, and really encourage folks to try it out for themselves in their own yards or homes.
Great. Okay, that is a significant difference and something we should bring up with the city probably, but all of us can bring up things to the city. And going on to that, I know you're going to say your own organization, but is there, the two things I ask people is, what organization do you want, message do you want to get out to people of organizations for them to support? And then that's first question. Second question is, what can people do daily on one little thing they can do daily? So let's go with the organizations first.
Yeah, so compost.bc.ca, Compost Education Center, definitely. That's one that I can recommend, and we would so.
And what if they're not in the area? What if they're?
Yeah, if you're not in the area, there's still tons of resources on our website, so still check that out. And then I'd really encourage you to look to, you know, search food security non-for-profit in your area or online, or search, you know, growing my own food, and see what comes up for your region when you're doing Google searches. There are a ton of openly, freely accessible information out there in the world. Another one that just recently went up for free online, which is incredible, is a local author and teacher, Linda Gilson. Her website's a wealth of information, and she's just put her year-round gardening slides for her workshops up for free on her website. So that could be another thing to check out. And then, yeah, the Capital Regional Agriculture and Initiatives Roundtable, CR Fair, is a neat organization that's kind of acting as the umbrella for the Growing Food Together project. And the Growing Food Together project for this region, folks can check that out online as well. They've got a website up and going, and I think it's growingfood-together.com.
Good, yeah, I'll put all of that stuff up on the screen for people to get.
Yeah, so that could be another really neat one to check out. And if you're interested in the free seedlings that the City of Victoria is offering out, you can find out information about it on that website, and they're going to be sort of distributing them all through June, and then doing a bunch more, I think, in August and September as well, for some more fall and through the winter crops as well. So yeah, those are some things that I would encourage folks to check out.
For sure. And so what's one thing that, not just in this region, but anywhere in the world, if you could get people doing one thing, what would you have them do daily or weekly or as a habit?
Yeah, you know, what's coming to my mind right away is actually just being grateful. I feel like when we start from a place of gratitude, then some of the other stuff comes a little bit more naturally. You know, if I really feel grateful for the food that's in front of me, or for the ability to breathe and wake up in the morning, then perhaps I'll recognize the interconnections that those things have with the earth, and perhaps then feel more inclined to steward those things that support my life, you know, and I'll recognize the interconnections of the earth, and how it's so intertwined with our life. So yeah, I would say maybe having a gratitude practice of writing down something that you're grateful for every day.
I know somebody who does that several times a day, and might be having her on, because she's also a minimalist as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So so I'm going to remind our listeners to find out more at compost.bc.ca, and we will have, if we didn't put it in this all over this podcast, we'll put in those other recommended places. And I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've learned a lot. The phrase food security is my big takeaway today. I was like, I'm going to go check food security out. So thanks for coming on Press Reset World podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thanks for reaching out.
And to our listeners, please leave us comments and tell your friends to subscribe to pressresetworld.com or our YouTube channel, which is PRW. And the link should be at the end of each podcast on pressresetworld.com. And perhaps you would make an excellent guest here or have an article to submit to our blog. We love to have other people write our blog posts. So we want your opinion, your expertise. So contact us. Many minds make deeper wisdom. Till next time, thank you very much.